Okay, so we have this week Parshas Shlach. Shlach, the translation of the word Shlach means send. It's an instruction. And it comes from the opening of the Parsha when Hashem says to Moshe, Shlach lecha, send, Shlach lecha l'daitcha, Rashi explains. Hashem tells Moshe to send messengers, not really messengers, spies, I guess. Spies is probably the correct word, to send spies to go and investigate the land of Israel. Obviously, this was before coming to Israel. It was just after leaving Egypt, and we know, the Jewish people know that we're on the path, the journey towards the land of Israel. We're going to get the land of Israel. It's been destined for millennia. And it kind of makes sense that if you're going to be going to a new place, you're going to be taking it over, you send people ahead to investigate so that you can come up with a strategy. Now, the job of the Meraglim here was to bring back information, right? When you have, generally the people who go ahead to scout out in war are not the generals, it's not the commanders, it's not the people who make the strategy. They send people whose expertise is to get ahead, to go unnoticed, to gather information, and to bring it back. So their job was to bring back information. Now, there are a lot of ways in which this story went, way left relative to what the plan was, because Moshe sent them. So now we know a whole lot of bad things came out of this story. Moshe sent them with Hashem's blessing, which means that sending them they weren't not supposed to have been sent. There was nothing wrong with them being sent. One of the major ways in which they went wrong, and this is not the one we're going to focus on, but just to mention, it's an important one, is that they were sent to bring back information, right? What happens? Think about just general, stereotypical situation. You have, an army, a military that's going to war over something. It makes sense that, these days a lot of this kind of stuff is done with drones and satellites and stuff, but going back in time, and there's still a lot of this still needs to be done by people to get information, to bring back information. So people will be sent to bring back information, which they will then relay to the people who are in charge of the strategy, who will use that information to come up with a strategy and a recommendation. What happened here was the spies were sent to bring back information, and they didn't just come back with information, they came back with recommendations. They came back with mostly a discouraging message saying, we're not going to be able to do this. That was never their job. A spy's job is not to make recommendations or predictions. A spy's job is to give them information. Their job was to come back and to tell Moshe Rabbeinu, this is what we saw, at which point Moshe would oversee, the coming up with a strategy. So that's one way in which they went really, really wrong. They misunderstood their role. Just realized we're not on Zoom. Okay. So they misunderstood their role. But before we even get there, we're going to have some much more fundamental problems or issues that we need to clarify and understand here. So, right, Moshe Rabbeinu sends these spies ahead, scouts, to go ahead, bring back information. Now, aside from the fact that they were never supposed to come back with a recommendation or a prediction, that wasn't their job, it wasn't their role. Even if that was okay that they did that, their recommendation doesn't seem to make any sense. Right, so what did they say? Let's have a look inside. Let's read from the top in the beginning, and we'll probably spend most of the time outside, but let's start inside. So in the Hebrew, page 23. Parshas Shlach, the Torah tells us, the spy said, what did they say when they came back? But and in doing so, they basically terrified the entire Jewish people and scared them and discouraged them out of being interested in going to the land of Israel. What did they tell them? They will not be able to. It is impossible to conquer the land of Israel because the people are too strong and they're not going to be able to take over the land, etc. And therefore, Tanu, they claimed, we will not be able to go up and to successfully wage war, ki chazaku mimeno, because it is stronger than us. The land is stronger than us. The land, presumably intending to include the land and its inhabitants. This doesn't seem to really add up though. Like, who are these people? These were spies who went to the land of Israel. They were sent by Moshe. So first of all, obviously Moshe would have selected very carefully who he sent. Before we even get there, let's just go super duper basic. These were people who were living in the desert. How were they living in the desert? We discussed last week, what were they eating? They were eating man. Their food was miraculous. They got water as much as they needed, clean, healthy, pleasant tasting water in the middle of the desert from the well of Miriam, also miraculous. They were out in the wild, protected from predators by the Aron, by the Ark, and the clouds of glory, also miraculous. So these were people whose lives on a minute-to-minute basis, their food, their drink, the fact that they weren't eaten for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or all of the above by predators on a daily basis was all miraculous in their faces. These were not people who could possibly have been confused about whether or not Hashem is able to, protect them from nature, overcome nature in their interests as he deems necessary or interested to do. So how did these people not believe that Hashem would be able to take them into the land of Israel and give them the ability to conquer the inhabitants? It doesn't make any sense. Their life was miraculous literally on an hourly basis. Every bite of food they ate, every sip of water they drank, their physical protection. They were just at Har Sinai not very long ago. They heard Hashem's voice. Go back, and all of this we're talking is in a span of a few weeks. What happened 7 weeks before they got the Torah? Came out of Egypt, 10 plagues, split the sea. How are people, and we're not talking about they heard this from their parents. We're not talking about they saw this 10 years ago and they've since, it's sort of gone back in the recesses of their mind and their recency bias. And this is their recency bias. Their recency bias tells them we do not need to be concerned about nature. Our lives are protected, managed, taken care of, overseen by God on a minute-to-minute basis. Presently, at the time, going back to the Exodus from Egypt, splitting of the sea. How is it possible that these people came back and said, Hashem said that we're going to go to the land of Israel and he's going to take us and settle us there? How did they not think that Hashem was going to be able to make that happen for them? Or not even that Hashem wasn't going to be able to make that happen for them. We know, if we have strong faith, we know that Hashem is able to. Okay, Hashem is able to. Does he always? We've had some difficult things in our recent history where we've seen instances in which there are things that it would have been nice if Hashem had decided to make it otherwise, and we know he could have, but he didn't. For us, that would have been fair enough. But these were people who not only saw that Hashem could do what he wants, Hashem does. Every minute of every day for these people, it was their life at the time that Hashem was managing their lives in a completely non-natural way, down to the most basic needs. How did they struggle with the idea that they're going to come, Hashem's going to take over, boom, boom, it's going to be settled, they'll go in, they'll settle, and that'll be the end of it? Well, what was the... It doesn't make any sense that they had any issue with this whatsoever. And the answer is, or what we're gonna now look at their message in a whole new light and at a completely different level. We're gonna start with keeping in mind exactly all of these things that we mentioned, gave them a perspective which is, it's not the fact that they lived this miraculous life and their needs were taken care of and they had the protection, etc. That doesn't challenge why they made this recommendation. That's the actual reason itself why they made the recommendation. We just have to understand what their motivation was and what they meant by this recommendation. So let's go inside for a little bit. Oh, also another thing that we're going to have to clarify is the bad recommendation came from 10 out of the 12 spies, right? There were 12 spies, one of each of the 12 tribes. Now, 10 of those came back and were just like, nah, this is a bad idea. We definitely shouldn't be doing this. And then Kalev and Yisroel were the two spies who didn't, go sideways. They stayed on point. And Kalev came back and was like, what are you guys saying? No, wrong message. We're going to go up. We're going to succeed. And this is going to work out. Now, think about it for a second. Let's say that we were Kalev. Or let's say that Kalev was coming to us for a recommendation, right? So all of his colleagues, the other 10 spies, had come and just told the Jewish people, let's not go, this is crazy, we're never going to succeed. What would be a sensible approach for Kalev to come back and try to talk us out of it? If let's say that Kalev was consulting with us now and he said, guys, we all know that this is wrong, how am I going to talk the Jewish people into, and get them to realize that this is wrong? What would be a sensible approach? Say to them, guys, how does this make any sense? Look at the miracles we experience every day. Our life is miraculous on a minute-to-minute basis every day. And it has been for months. And it is now, today. How are we not managing to believe that Hashem is going to make this happen? Why would you buy into this? Why are you concerned? Of course, Hashem can make this happen. And if Hashem said He will, look at the way Hashem is taking care of us every day. If He said He will, He will. What's your issue? Let's go do this. But He didn't say that. He said, let's go. Ole nale, we will go up, v'yarashnu osa, and we will inherit the land. I mean, that's kind of valid, but he had a readily available argument or way of explaining to us that the concern made no sense whatsoever, and he just neglected to use it. Why didn't he mention any of these things? All of these things that we are now talking about, which make the claims and the recommendations of the other 10 spies make no sense whatsoever, Kalev should have just brought that up. Right? If you have an opportunity to explain to someone very clearly why their concern is not a concern, does it make sense to not mention any of those things at all and just say, oh, don't worry, let's just do it? Of course not. If you can alleviate someone's concerns reasonably and logically, it makes a lot of sense to do that. So why didn't he?
Maybe he also didn't really want to go, so that's why he kind of said the right thing, but he didn't try so hard.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense if we're looking at the picture at a sort of, at face value. It's almost like he was trying to convince himself. Or, no, that's not really what you're saying though, right? What you're saying is more that he didn't really want to convince them. He just didn't want to feel guilty that he hadn't done anything. So he wanted to say, no, guys, we really should go, it's fine. But he didn't actually want them to be convinced effectively, right? Is that what you're suggesting? It makes a lot of sense. But we're going to talk about it at a whole completely different layer and level. So we're going to not reinterpret, but adjust our understanding or get a new perspective on where the spies were coming from, what were their concerns. Now, the concerns that they had were the concerns, but really it was at a very different level than the way we're understanding and interpreting it at the moment. So, and that's going to also help us understand Kalev's response. So, if we think about the lives that they were living, right? We talked last week about the Mon. Life was amazing. Their physical needs were taken care of. Their food, lechem min hashamayim. They had miraculous food that was perfectly nutritious with no waste. It was delivered to them every day. They had beautiful, clean, tasty, fresh water to drink. Unlimited as much as they needed. They were protected physically. they had no material concerns to take care of. Think about what life would look like if we had no material concerns to be worried about. Forget to worried about, just to take care of, just the amount of time. How much of our time is occupied by taking care of things that frankly we'd rather not have to take care of if we had the choice? Simple basics. Preparing food, taking care of hygiene, laundering clothes. All these things, they didn't have to worry about any of that. They didn't, at least the tzaddikim, as we talked about last week, they didn't have to worry about no food preparation. They opened the door, flap to their tent, and there was ready-made delicious food that could taste like anything they wanted and was perfectly nutritious, right? What's one of the biggest hurdles to eating well today, eating a nutritious diet, is just the amount of time it takes. And if you can afford to have someone prepare a healthy diet, amazing. And it's a good investment if you can, but if you can't, which probably most people can't, just eating healthy food, if you want it to actually be somewhat enjoyable, is very labor intensive. It's a lot of time and preparation and buying ingredients and preparing food. It's a big hurdle. And they didn't have that. They had perfect nutrition on their doorstep taken care of. Water, clothes were laundered by the clouds, the Midrash tells us, everything taken care of. They could spend their time on whatever they wanted to spend their time on, and they had no pressing needs that were taking their time. Imagine.
So then it was really like, that was their normal life. So did they even really see it as a miracle? Because that's how their life was. So it was almost like they were spoiled.
Well, I mean, these were people who had been slaves in Egypt a few weeks earlier, so they knew the difference. But yeah, I mean, and keep in mind that this was the state of things in the desert. What happens when they get to the land of Israel? No more man, no more well of Miriam, no more clouds, protection. What are they going to have to do? They're going to have to dig up the ground. They're going to have to put seeds in the ground. They're going to have to be concerned with irrigation. They're going to have to harvest their crops. They're going to have to process their crops. Right, they're going to have to do all these things, the $1,500 sandwich we've talked about in the past. They're going to have to do all of that. They're going to have to dig wells and maintain wells if they want to have water to drink. They're going to have to take care of their clothes. They're going to have to take care of their hygiene. But before you even think about anything that they would actually want to do, find some time to daven, find some time to study some Torah, find some time for, personal spiritual growth. It's like, And keep in mind, they had no technology. They were doing all of this by hand. Be lucky if they found a couple minutes a day after doing all of this by hand to actually, engage in the personal pursuits that they really wanted to be involved in. In the desert, to sleep a few hours, let's say 7 hours, 8 hours, they wanted to get a really solid night's sleep. 8 hours sleep, that's 16 hours a day with nothing demanding their time other than what they felt like giving their time to. They could study, they could daven, they could meditate, they could contemplate, they could learn. Their life was, if they wanted it to be, and many of them did, they had 16 hours a day available to spiritual growth. Now, if you're a person who is interested in the pursuit of spirituality and spiritual growth, would you want to go to the land of Israel from the desert? No way. Well, why would you want to do that? If someone, let's just give a modern day equivalent, let's say that someone's in an environment, to a degree, it's the yeshiva environment versus the post-yeshiva real life environment or experience, let's say. And let's say someone, will tell you, look, you can, be in this environment where all your needs are going to be taken care of. Like, let's take it, a few stages past yeshiva. You're going to have healthy, nutritious, tasty food prepared for you on demand. You'll have it when you need it. It'll be ready and available. Your laundry is going to be done for you. I don't know that there's a way around personal hygiene, but everything else, right? Everything else is going to be taken care of. Everything. And you can spend all your waking hours doing what you want, learning chassidus, learning halacha, davening, meditating, discussing your growth with friends, having farbrengens, learning chumash, learning whatever you want. and you get into it and you're involved and you're involved in this experience, and then someone says, okay, you know what? There's another option, and that option is that you've now got to start preparing your own food. Preparing your own food includes buying your own food, which means, earning a sustainable living on an ongoing basis so that you can pay for your rent and buy your food and find time to prepare that food and everything else, etc., etc., etc. And, all of a sudden you're going to have to do your own laundry again. And, all these things take a lot of time. And that's an option for you. Now I want you to go look into that possibility and come back with a recommendation. What are you going to say? You're going to say, not interested, thank you very much. Right? And that's what the spies said. They came back and said, Eretz Oicheles Yoshveha, this land consumes its inhabitants. When we go there and we have no more man, we have no more spring of Miriam, we have no more automatic laundered clothes by the clouds, we have no more physical protection, we're going to have to take care of all of that. Oicheles Yoshveha, it's going to consume us. It's going to take over our whole life. We're not going to have the luxury of 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day of spiritual growth. Who wants that? We're not going to be able to succeed. Now, the issue wasn't that Hashem wasn't going to be able to make it happen. The issue was that we're talking about going into an environment in which it's not the desert and Hashem's supernatural, maintenance comes to an end. We talked last week and we were sidetracked for a half an hour and got on this whole thing, which... You don't have to feel guilty, by the way. That was me, not you, that made it into a half hour. But, right, we were talking about the fact that in the desert, it was more on the side of, Hashem doing things for them, as opposed to now it's our autonomy and it's our independence. The issue wasn't Hashem's not going to be able to do it if he wants to. The issue was, we've got this now in the desert. When we go to Israel, this is over because we know that's not the plan. The plan is, this is our maintenance in the desert. When we get to Israel, it's time for real life. Yeshiva's over. When we get to Israel, we're going to have to do everything for ourselves. And you know what happens when real life hits? Real life is consuming. Eretz Oicheles Yoshveha. Real life takes over you. It's going to consume us. And we're not going to be able to spend, we'll be lucky to find a few minutes here and there to be able to actually take our own spiritual growth seriously. To be able to take our connection to Hashem seriously. To be able to make divinity a real part of our lives in a serious way, we're going to struggle to find minutes at a time to do that. And it's going to be all-consuming. It's going to consume us. This was their issue. It's not that Hashem can't do it. It's that we're going into a new stage in which Hashem's not going to do it. And we don't want that sort of life. Who would? If they had the choice. I wouldn't. But where they went wrong, and this is Kaleb's response, is that's missing the point. It makes sense. And again, this is one of those big topics where there's inevitable tension between two opposite motivations and drawing us in two different directions. Because this is not, and this is important to clarify. This is not saying the fact that this approach of theirs was wrong doesn't mean that it's not healthy to have that desire. Halavai, as you say in Hebrew, if only we all wanted our spiritual growth that badly, that we just wanted to be free of all the other demands on our time so that we would have all our time available to learn and to connect to Hashem and to daven and, if only. It's not a bad thing to want that. But, once a person achieves that perspective and that set of priorities and desires, it does then have to be tempered by an appreciation for why we're here. Right? All of that is nice. But the question is, why are we here? Why did Hashem put us here? Why did Hashem give us all these things? What does Hashem want? Not just what do we want. And it's not just, even if we want to, bring it back a little, because what does Hashem want is a very idealistic question that hopefully, we all care about to a degree. But let's bring it back down a little. What Hashem wants is also going to be the reason for which He created us. And Hashem designed us to live a life in which we fulfill Hashem's purpose for creation, which means that when we live according to that purpose and according to what Hashem wants, we're living the life that we were designed to live, which is ultimately going to be the greatest source of fulfillment and well-being, because we're doing what we were designed to do. And that's what brings fulfillment. And that's true across every species that's alive. The thing, that ensures greatest well-being is living the life it was designed to live, right? Which is why animals are healthier and have greater well-being mentally and emotionally in the wild than they do in captivity. Even though life in the zoo is safe and comfortable and they have everything they need, there's also quite a high incidence of what seems to be clinical depression amongst animals in the zoo. Why? They have no concerns. They have nothing to be anxious about, nothing to be depressed about. They have good, healthy food when they need it. They have veterinary care. They have everything they need. The bottom line is they weren't designed to live that life, and it doesn't make them feel good. It's not good for them. You send them out into the wild, ecstatic. They're gonna, one of the kind of videos that's guaranteed to go viral on social media is, when an animal's like trapped in something and then someone comes along and gets it out and frees it, and you see the video ends, you see the animal running off out into the bushes, out into the trees, and guaranteed. Why do people love that so much? Why is everybody gonna like and share that video? Because there's a very profound, primal appreciation that we have for that animal going free and being able to live the life it's supposed to live out in the wild. Now, when an animal goes out into the wild, it's almost guaranteed to have a shorter lifespan than it would in the zoo. It's dangerous. It's going to be someone or something's breakfast sooner or later. It's a matter of time. And it's going to be hungry a lot of that time, looking for food and struggling to get food, etc. But it's still better off and it's happier and healthier because it's living the life that it was designed to live. And it's going to have a far greater sense of well-being, and it's better off. And the same thing is true to us, true for us. When we live the life that we were designed to live, we could ask, what does Hashem want? And let's, focus on what Hashem wants. But we don't have to demand that higher level of idealism from ourselves to ask this question and to get to the answer, because that's a pretty high level of idealism. We also likely, at least some of us, also still care about ourselves and our quality of life and our well-being. But it's the same question. What life are we designed to live? And therefore, what life is going to ultimately be the most fulfilling and rewarding, and what's going to give us the greatest sense of well-being? So why are we here? Why did Hashem create time and space and the universe and the galaxies and and the solar system, this solar system, and put us here on this planet? Why all of that? One of the numerous answers is, and this is the one that we tend to focus on the most, is, as the Medrash says, Hashem wanted to have a dwelling place in physical, material reality. In other words, Hashem wanted us to bring divinity into physical matter, into physical reality. Now, that's not a natural thing, because the nature of physical reality is that it is physical, not spiritual. Physical and spiritual are separate categories, separate layers of reality, separate categories of existence. The things that define, the parameters that define physical existence are different to the parameters that define spiritual existence. And Hashem put us here to bring divinity, to bring godliness into physical reality. And when you're living in the desert and you're not engaging with the world, and you're not preparing food, and you're not interacting with people in a professional environment, and you're not doing anything except for study, pray, meditate, it's amazing. The spiritual growth that we would experience ourselves would be amazing. But Hashem's plan is just going to be sitting around waiting. No one's going to be doing it. And ultimately, what happens? What happens if we're pursuing our own spiritual growth and avoiding that for which we were created and designed? Ultimately, we're not going to end up very well off. Right? We'll become very spiritually in tune, to a degree, but we're also missing the point, which means that ultimately we're going to end up feeling unfulfilled and unsatisfied and, and unhappy. And that stuff creeps up very slowly and gradually, but it gets there. And that's what's going to happen if we just focus on our own spiritual growth without taking into account the other part of the picture. Now, again, this is not knocking spiritual growth. Hashem did give them this chance in the desert, and we do need to focus on spiritual growth, because without focusing on our spiritual growth, we're not going to integrate divinity into the world. What's going to happen? Eretz ocheles yoshveha. The land is going to eat us. It's going to chew us up and spit us out, and we're not going to fulfill our purpose if we're not very strongly grounded in our own spiritual growth. So we do have to have that. But that's not the whole point. The point is to then, with that grounding and connection that we have as a result of focusing on our spiritual growth, to then take that connection and that grounding and use that to facilitate us then bringing divinity, godliness into the world by interacting with it, by engaging with it. So they said, let's not go to the land of Israel and lose this amazing experience. It's going to chew us up and spit us out. Not because Hashem can't, but because we're not going to be any longer in the stage in which Hashem is coddling us. We're going to be in the stage of Hashem saying, yes, go out and do this, make it happen, get it done. And it's going to be so hard, and it's going to be so overwhelming. And it's likely going to consume us. That was their concern. And what did Kalev say? What was Kalev's answer? Kalev didn't say it's fine, Hashem's... Because the answer to their concern wasn't Hashem can do anything. They weren't worried that Hashem couldn't. They just weren't interested in going into a stage in life in which Hashem's not going to. They didn't want to go into a stage in life when they don't get to just learn, study, daven, pray, meditate all day. They're going to have to get out and work the land and work and work across every part of their life and struggle to find time for spiritual growth at all. It's not that they didn't think Hashem could. It's that their conversation now is about a stage in life in which Hashem's not going to anymore, in which they're not going to be coddled, and they just didn't want it. And that's why Kalev didn't respond to all of that. Kalev said, "Olei nale v'yorashnu esa," we will inherit the land. And the message Kalev was giving was something very, very profound. And that was, first of all, he said, Olei na'ale. Comes from the word aliyah, right? Moving to Eretz Yisrael, when a person moves to Israel, it's referred to as aliyah, which means going up. Olei na'ale. Now, in one sense, in Hebrew, this is kind of a poetic approach. It's repetition. It's saying, Olei na'ale, we will go up. We will, it's flowery and poetic, repeating the word. It's a hyperbolic function, I guess we could say. It's a rhetorical feature to repeat the word and make it nice and poetic. But there's more than that. He's saying, Olei na'ale, we will ascend. We will ascend twice. There are two things that are going to happen here. We are going to go up into the land of Israel, into the Holy Land. That's already Aliyah. That's a stage of going up. And you know what happens when we do? When we do that, we're going to go and we're going to have to work hard. We're going to have to work hard for every cup of water that we want to drink. We're going to have to dig and maintain wells. We're going to have to work hard for every slice of bread we want to eat. We're going to have to plow the land and sow the seeds and harvest and grind and mill and mix and bake and all of that. And you know what happens when we do those things? And when we maintain our focus and grounding in spirituality and spiritual growth, and we also take that and interact with the world and engage with the world and bring that divinity that we have integrated into ourselves into the world and integrated into the land and into the wells and into the everything that we do, na'aleh, we have a second layer of growth, a second ascent. We go up to the realization of our purpose. We go up to the spiritual achievement and fulfillment of living the life that we were designed to live, of realizing the purpose for which the universe exists. Is it going to be fun? Of course not. Nothing that valuable is it going to be easy, more importantly? Of course not. Nothing that valuable ever comes easy in life, ever, with zero exceptions. Maybe not zero, but close to it. Very close to zero exceptions, that something that valuable in life is going to come easy. It's going to take a lot of work on an ongoing basis. But that's going to take us up to a second level of profound achievement and fulfillment that we would never be able to achieve here in the desert with our easy, cushy spiritual pursuit. We could never achieve that here. We're going to go there and we're going to have a whole second layer of growth and achievement and connection and fulfillment and realization that we would never have here. Why? Yorashnu Isa. How can we be so confident that we're actually going to succeed in that? Maybe we will be consumed. Maybe we'll just be completely overwhelmed and we just won't manage. So point number one is it is going to take hard work. It's not going to happen on its own. You know, there was no guarantee that this was going to happen on its own. That being said, he said, Yorashnu, so we will inherit it. Now, inheritance is a very technical thing. In halacha, there are some very unique things about inheritance. Now, inheritance, when someone inherits a parent, right? When a parent is deceased and the offspring inherit the parent, what happens technically is that the children, the offspring, actually step into the role of the parent. And they get every authority, every power, every right that the parent had within, their estate and everything they owned, etc. The child automatically steps into those shoes, steps into the place of the parent and inherits not just the estate, but inherits the status, inherits the authority, inherits everything. They take over them. Now, and that happens automatically, right? Unlike other things, if a person wants to purchase something, right, halachically there's a whole set of conditions before a person can even be, eligible to engage in commerce and to make a purchase, etc. Let's say, for example, if a person is, in Hebrew, the technical word is shoter, which means someone who's not sane, someone who's not sufficiently mentally well and capable to engage in commerce responsibly, for example. If they purchase something, the purchase isn't valid. It's not a valid transaction. It's not a binding transaction because this person doesn't have the faculties to be able to engage in that responsibly. But that person does inherit their parents. Because inheritance is not a transaction. It's something that happens by virtue of being this person's child. If you are this person's child, if someone is the child of their parents and their parents pass away, they are their child. It doesn't matter who they are. It matters who they are, that they're the child. It doesn't matter how capable they are or are not, how sane they are or are not, how old they are. A 1-year-old can't engage in commerce. A 1-year-old can 100% entirely inherit their parents. Kalev says, this is an inheritance. We don't need to have a certain level of achievement in order to be guaranteed that we will be able to do this. This is our inheritance. We have divinity inside of us by virtue of being who we are. We are the chosen people. Hashem chose us at Mount Sinai. We chose Hashem at Mount Sinai. We entered into an irreversible familial relationship with Hashem. We are the chosen people and we have divinity within us. It's an inheritance. Which means by virtue of that, we are capable of doing what needs to be done. Is it going to be easy? No. No one promised it's going to be easy. We are going to have a whole second level of growth, of achievement, of fulfillment, of realization that's impossible in the cushy life, spiritual life in the desert. Yeah, that's going to take hard work. But don't be worried when people tell you, oh, it's going to be too hard. It's like, how are we going to engage in real life without getting off track and missing the point? It's an inheritance. We have it in us. By virtue, it's a birthright that we have, the fact that we have what it takes to be able to do this. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it. We have what it takes. It's inheritance. It's a birthright. And if we are motivated and we put in the effort, we can and will succeed. That was his answer. And that's why he didn't get caught up in the whole, oh, Hashem can do it. That's not the answer. That's not the point. They all knew Hashem could. They were having a conversation about going into a stage in which it's time for real life, and we don't have that protective environment anymore. And that life is consuming, and Kaleb's response was, yeah, it is consuming. And if you allow it to consume you, it will. And that's because Olei Na'ale, we have a whole second level of achievement and realization here to get. That's not going to come easy, but Yorashnu Oisa, this achievement and this growth is our inheritance. We have it within us. It's a birthright. We have it built into who we are by definition. It's not something that requires achievement. It's not something that requires any particular status or growth or anything else. It's there by birth. We have what it takes and we can do it. It's a birthright. It's a Yerusha. It's an inheritance. That was his answer. Now, in terms of, one second. Let's talk a little bit about the benefit and the value of what they were going to do, right? Because on one hand, it's like, yes, well, this is what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to integrate divinity into the world. Okay, that's nice. The reason it's valuable is because it's what Hashem wants. But like the actual spiritual outcome of sitting and studying and meditating and being in the desert and all of that, that's actually a far superior outcome. It's just not the one that Hashem really wants. Not so simple. What's the benefit of being in the desert and meditating, learning, davening, and not worrying about anything else? The benefit of that was ultimately, I mean, in terms of, we could look at it experientially, that they got to experience, divine enlightenment and spiritual evolution and blah, blah, blah. All of that's true. But let's look at it in terms of the actual benefit, the objective benefit, not the benefit in terms of what they enjoyed and got to experience. And the objective benefit was they were integrating divinity into the world. And they were actually, what happened in the desert was that divinity, spirituality, godliness had completely overridden nature, which is like a pretty substantial, manifestation of Hashem's desire of having divinity in the world, except that it's not really. Right? Let's think for a minute. There could probably be a more sophisticated metaphor for this, but this is one I've used before and it's handy and we don't really have time to come up with a new one. So the reason that I use this was because I was talking about it in the past more in terms of the Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Abraham is a godly soul and animal soul. And I was talking about commandeering and the godly soul commandeering the animal soul in terms of getting the body to do what it wants. And because I used the word commandeer, it brought to mind a ship. And the same thing could be true with a plane, right? Let's say, right, let's whatever, a ship, a plane, it doesn't matter what. Let's stick with a ship. If you, let's say, are on a ship and you want to go somewhere and the ship is traveling through the ocean and it has a destination and the captain and the crew are taking it somewhere and you want to go somewhere else. Now, if you have the strength and the ability, hypothetically, you could, overpower them and either force them at gunpoint to reroute and to go where you want them to go, or maybe, tie them all up and just drive the ship yourself if you wanted to, if you knew how. Hijack the plane, let's say, would be the modern day equivalent. But that's not really your best approach. Now, in a sense, it might be the most sensible approach in most circumstances, but let's say that you had the ability, instead of having to do that, you didn't have to fight with anyone, you didn't have to overpower anyone, you had the ability to get the captain and the staff on board and to actually convince them that it was a good idea to change directions and to go to where you want to go, and to make them want to do that. In which two of these instances have you more effectively taken over the vessel, the vehicle, and gotten it to go where you want it to go? In the first one? In both instances, the ship's going where you want it to go. First of all, in the first one, number one is, it's a very high-risk situation. If they break free, you're finished. Number one. Number two is, you've gotten the ship to go where you want it to go, but you haven't really gotten the crew, you haven't commandeered, well, commandeered is not quite the right word perhaps, but your control. Let's talk about the degree of control. In which one of these two instances have you more thoroughly and deeply taken control of the ship? In the second one. You've taken control of the crew. You didn't have to overpower them because you've taken control of the whole picture. You've taken control of the captain, taken control of the crew. They're doing what you want. You don't have to lock anyone up. You don't have to suppress anyone, which means number one, you're eliminating all of the risks associated with that. Number two is not only are you getting the ship to go where you want it to go, you're getting the captain and the crew to want to go where you want to go. Which means now you've actually got them on board. Now, if your goal isn't just to get the ship to go there, but to get, the maximum influence in that direction, now, in addition to getting the ship to go there, you've got a whole bunch of people who want to be there with you. And instead of, let's say that you have things to get done when you get to that place, instead of, tying them up and, you get the ship to go there, and then when you get there, you're on your own and you better pray that they don't escape and come and, take revenge. They're all going to get off the ship with you and be on your team and be like, okay, so what are we doing here now? You've got a whole bunch of people on board with you. So, miracles, getting out of Egypt, splitting the sea, breaking nature, overriding nature, all of that is a very extreme, these are extreme examples of divinity, godliness coming into the world, overriding everything. The man, the spring of Miriam, the clouds, all of this stuff was like a lot of godliness in the world everywhere. But when we would then go into the land of Israel and have this birthright, this divinity inside of us, and by means of taking that and staying grounded and focused and then engaging with the world and plowing the land and digging wells and engaging in commerce, etc., bring that divinity into the processes of the world. Make the wells and the earth become saturated with divinity because we're doing that all for the right reasons. And the land and the plows and the animals we're using to plow the land, etc., and the commerce in which we engage, all of that becomes divine. All of that has divinity integrated into it because we're not breaking the system anymore. We're working with it and integrating divinity into it. We're making everything divine rather than pushing it out of the way to just have a nuclear bomb of divinity obliterate everything. Maybe we have the new metaphor. Right? If you want to, take over a city, one way to do that would just be to drop a nuclear bomb and there's no more resistance, but you know what? You don't have much value out of this city anymore, do you? Because no one can go there for, thousands, millions of years. It's not a place to live. And even if it could, let's say that or you drop not a radioactive bomb, but a massive bomb that just wipes out the whole city, and now you can come and rebuild. It's you don't have, you've got the land, that's about it. Imagine if you can come in and instead of blowing everything up and killing everybody, you could come and convince everybody of your mission and your vision for the city and get them all on board. In which one of these instances have you gotten more value? You have the existing infrastructure, you have the existing population, you have them on your team to work with and to bring your vision to an existing place rather than obliterating everything. And it's there's no opposition to your vision, but your vision doesn't have much of a realization either. Right? In the desert, it was like an obliteration of opposition to the vision. There was nothing demanding your time, but there was no interaction with the world in which to integrate divinity. In the land of Israel, we went there, we started working and all of that, etc. And Kolev says, yes, it's hard, but that's where the real value is. That's where the real realization is. We're going to be working with nature. We're going to be integrating Hashem's vision. Hashem's vision is the integration of divinity into the physical world, into physical life, into natural life. That's a far more profound integration of divinity into the world. And I think integration here is the operative word. It's a far superior introduction of divinity into the world if we can integrate it into real life, rather than if we just crash it down on everything and smash everything out of the way. And that's what happened in the desert. And that was Kaleb's message. And it's the same message to us. And Kaleb didn't say, oh, this stint, this time in the desert is a bad thing. We all have to have that. In the bigger picture of our lives, early in life, we have to have, it's very healthy and productive to have a period of time when we're, metaphorically in the desert where we have the minimum possible focus and demands on, the material side of life, and we can really dedicate ourselves to a focused spiritual growth and development. But then we have to head out of that and take that out and integrate it into the world in real life. Same thing on a daily basis. We have to start our day with davening and with some Torah study, because if we don't, then it will consume us. But if we start that and then we go out into the world and bring that with us, that's the real victory. That's when we really integrate divinity. That's when we really realize that mission. And then what happens? Oleh Na'aleh, the realization of our purpose and the fulfillment is a whole different level. It's a lot of work. Is there some risk? Yeah. Is it hard? Yeah. Is it demanding? Yeah. But there's a whole second category of fulfillment and growth that you can't have without getting out there and integrating with the world and bringing that divinity into real life. L'chaim.